My name is Carrie Gruby-Leibarker. I'm the Administrator and Consumer Advocate with the Department of Consumer Affairs, and it's my pleasure to be here today to talk to you about robocalls and your privacy. The presentation today is not meant to serve as a substitute for reading the various laws discussed, requesting a legal opinion from the appropriate authority, or seeking legal counsel. We're just trying to give an overview of the topic and let you know things that we hope will be tools for you in combating robocalls. But let's talk about why we're really here. And this is one of my favorite, posts that we have on Twitter and on Facebook. Robocalls are terrible. Hang up and tell DCA about them. So people often ask, why am I getting so many robocalls? And it's because it's easy, it's cheap, and they're successful, right? So like I mentioned, a lot of times robocalls are perpetrated by scammers, and they're successful in being able to get money or personal identifying information from those who they call. And they can do it over the internet, so they can be located anywhere in the world. But there are ways to reduce them, and education is a key component, a key tool in being able to do so, and that's why we're here today. So please make sure to share any of the tips and stuff that you hear with your friends and family so we can spread the word and hopefully reduce folks who are victims of these kinds of robocalls, or at least who feel like they can take charge, right? And that we can limit and manage some of the robocalls that we're taking in. So let's give some background, talk a little bit about robocalls themselves. Like, what is a robocall? So it's a recorded message instead of a live person. If they're trying to sell you something, the robocall is illegal unless you gave written permission that that particular business can contact you that way. But just keep in mind that you can change your mind later. So if you did give written permission that a certain business can call you via robocall, you can contact them and let them know you've changed your mind and you don't want to be contacted via robocall anymore. And some robocalls are allowed without your permission. The key is that they cannot include a sales pitch. So some robocalls are permitted. Some other ones, even if you have not given written permission to them, are permitted as well. So let's talk about those. So these are the folks where there's no permission required. So messages that are purely informational. So appointment reminders, school delays, flight cancellations, things along those lines. As long as they're not trying to sell you something, it's informational only, those are permitted. Debt collection calls. So a debt collector is allowed to use a robocall to collect a debt. The key is that there are other rules under federal debt collection laws and state laws about when they can call you and how they have to conduct themselves on the call. But if they're trying to sell you services to lower your debt, those would be illegal and are probably scams, right? Because again, they're trying to sell you something that's not specifically about the debt itself. Number 3, political calls. So this has been something that has even gone to court in South Carolina about whether or not political calls are permitted, and they are. It's just one of those things. You can always ask to be removed from somebody's list if you give them that option, but usually those kinds of options aren't even given on the political calls that I've seen. Number 4, calls from some healthcare providers. So this would include the pharmacy, reminding you to refill that prescription. So certain healthcare providers can do the robocalls. And then number 5, messages from charities. So they're allowed to make the calls themselves, but if they are hiring someone to do it on their behalf, then you have to be someone who is a prior donor or a member of that charity for them to do the robocall, or else it's illegal. So they're allowed to do it if they're contacting you directly, or if they're contacting you via robocall by a third party if you were a prior donor or a member of the charity. But again, it doesn't hurt to see on all of these whether or not you have the automated option to opt out of future calls. So how can you know if a robocall is a scam? So you're going to ask yourself a couple of questions to navigate this. So, did I give the business permission to call me? If you did, you check that off and you move on to the next. If you did not, that could be a red flag. Does the business need my permission to call me? No. What if what if it was an informational call? What if it was a debt collector, a political call? You go through that list before and see, do they even need my permission to begin with? And if they fall on that list, great. If they don't fall on that list, it's a red flag. You should exercise caution. And are they asking for my personal identifying information or money via a gift card or a wire transfer? If you are getting a cold call such as this, it shouldn't even be a red flag. It should just be the alert, alert, alert. This is likely a scam. If someone is calling you out of the blue for this information, it's a scam. And then if you have someone who you didn't give them permission to call you, and they would need to have had your permission to call you, then it's likely they're already breaking the law by robocalling you. And even if they're not a scammer, they're an unscrupulous business who you probably would not want to do business with anyway. So what are some red flags of a scam? And so these are kind of those items that you want to, your senses should go up, your spidey sense should go up per se, if any of these things come into play with a robocall. If they're asking you to verify that personal identifying information, right? We just talked about kind of the #1 rule. If they ask you to wire transfer money or purchase a prepaid reloadable debit card or iTunes card. The feds, they don't want to be paid with Google cards or iTunes cards or whatever else, but those are very difficult to trace. If someone pays you with or if you pay someone with a prepaid debit card or an iTunes card or a Google Play card, I mean, who knows where they were when they got that money from you? And unless you notify us immediately or the card issuer immediately, it's very difficult to stop. Same thing with wire transferring money, right? You could transfer the money from Columbia, South Carolina to, we'll say, Jacksonville, Florida. But it doesn't mean somebody has to pick it up in Jacksonville, Florida. They could pick it up in Timbuktu. It's like paying cash. These methods are almost like paying cash. And so that's why scammers use them. If they send you a check and ask you to cash it and wire or send money somewhere else, that's a red flag. If they pose as a local, state, or federal law enforcement officer or government officials. So the IRS likely is not going to be doing robocalls, right? Someone for jury duty, missing jury duty and going through it is likely not going to do robocalls. But these kinds of things are also coupled together usually with some kind of threat of arrest or garnishment too. They're trying to get your attention. They're trying to make you not want to hang up or contact somebody else to verify, which is going to be exactly what we're going to tell you to do. And then sometimes they'll try and make you think that their offer is time sensitive. So no matter the type of scam that it could be, if it's an IRS tax fraud scam, if it's a Social Security Administration scam, if it's a car warranty scam, or any of these, if they have any of these elements, usually it's a combination of them. Those should be red flags that there is a scam going on. And something that a lot of people ask, oh, let me get to this first, sorry. #1 rule, I said it already, do not give any of your personal information to someone you do not know. Do not give financial information to someone you do not know. And that means a cold call. And we keep saying cold call because we're dealing with robocalls, but really, it's if you're contacted by any method and someone is asking you out the blue for that personal or financial information, do not give it up. Hang up. What about if your caller ID shows that it's coming from Washington, D.C. or the IRS or whatever else? Just like scammers can use technology to send out millions of robocalls at one time, they can use technology to disguise the caller ID. It's way easier than what you think. You're just downloading an app to do it. So many apps let you do outbound calls using a fake name and a number. They can send texts under someone else's name. And there's apps that often include some voice altering option. Sometimes these robocalls now, they sound like real people. But it's like if you say anything or there's a noise, or if you say nothing, just notice it keeps going. Like it's like they've timed it. So, we'll get into the recommendations for what to do when you get a robocall. But just know that they're using the caller ID spoofing technology to make something seem more legit, and they're also using the technology to do some voice alteration so it doesn't so much sound like a computer who's contacting you, which is usually, a red flag as well, that there's a scam at play. So scammers have these tools to make their schemes more legit, but don't worry because we have tools that we can use to combat them as well. So tools to get fewer robocalls. The National Do Not Call Registry. So this particular registry is housed within the Federal Trade Commission. It was created in 2003 to stop unwanted sales calls, right? So they're dealing with the sales aspect of it. It's free to register any phone number in the United States, and this is for personal phone numbers only. It can be landline phone numbers as well as cell numbers, but it's not for business telephone numbers. And after you sign up, you may still receive calls for up to 31 days because they update their lists, and the telemarketers and whatever have to get those updates and then use it for their systems. So folks, you know, are upset with the constant flood of calls that they get, even when they're signed up for the National Do Not Call Registry. And the Do Not Call Registry is a tool to help cut down on calls, but as we mentioned, there are some exemptions like the ones that we talked about previously that are going to allow some calls to keep coming through. So don't look at it as a tool to totally eliminate robocalls. It has a very specific purpose to try and stop those sales calls. But as we know, scammers, they don't care what the law says. So it's more likely to reduce as opposed to stop the calls. So how do you sign up for the Do Not Call Registry? You can call toll free from the telephone number that you want to enroll into the Do Not Call Registry at 888-382-1222, or you can go online to donotcall.gov. And you can also, through the donotcall.gov website, verify that you've registered. So if you're like, I don't know if I've ever registered my telephone number for the Do Not Call Registry, you can verify your registration there. And then you can also report unwanted calls too through that same site. And something to note is that the registration does not expire. So you can go through and verify it, but you don't ever have to re-enroll for the service. All right, so another tool, you can block calls on your cell phone. So you can do this by installing a call blocking or a call labeling device. So essentially this would act like a filter, and the company behind the app would use call data or reports from other people who are who have that particular service from that company. So other users like you, from the Federal Trade Commission, from other sources, and they're trying to predict whether or not a call is a scam. And then sometimes it will stop the call before it gets to you, or it will say scam or likely scam on the caller ID. And then some apps are free, but some you do have to pay for. So we want to make sure that you're shopping around, that you look at ratings of your app store, you look at online expert reviews, check out apps that are listed on the wireless industry site, the ctia.org. You want to make sure that you're getting a product that meets your needs, and you just want to see how effective it is. You can also check the built-in features of your phone. A lot of times you can do call blocking for specific numbers, but we know because they're likely spoofing numbers if they're a scammer and not following the federal or state telemarketing laws, then you can put in a number, but it'll likely pop up under another number. But you can also utilize the new Do Not Disturb functions on your phone, and that'll at least limit when you get calls, period, right? So if you're noticing you're not using your phone, you don't want to be disturbed by the telemarketing calls or the robocalls, then you can go ahead and set those Do Not Disturb parameters to keep your peace during that time at least. And then see what services your phone provider offers. As I mentioned, they often have some call labeling tools that are included in your plan, and you may have already noticed that through your caller ID. But you can check and see if there's something that you may not be aware of from your particular cell phone provider. There's also options for you to block calls on a traditional landline. So you can install a call blocking device. So it's similar to the app that you would download onto your cell phone, except for it's something you would connect into your landline. And they often have small boxes, that attach to your phone, and they use databases of known scam numbers, or they'll let you add numbers to block as well. Sometimes some of the devices only have the option for you to add numbers. They don't have their own database attached to it. And then other particular devices have something that's similar to CAPTCHA. When you go onto a website and it wants to make sure that you're a real person, and it's like, click all the pictures that have a fire hydrant in them, or put in these words, and it's like W2T, whatever, put in these letters or the numbers. So it's something like that, to where they try and weed out pre-recorded calls, because they don't have somebody live on the line who's able to press the number or whatever it is that the particular device requires for the call to go through. So again, we want you to shop around and understand the different options that are out there. You know, is it a device that just automatically sends calls to voicemail? They're not really weeding them out. It just kind of sends them through. Or what kind of methods are they using to identify if a call is a robocall? You can also check reviews online too, ask friends or family who may have a call blocking device installed on their landline. And then of course you can see what services your phone provider offers. A lot of times it's the call blocking for specific numbers, but then we know that that may not always be the successful way because of caller ID spoofing. You can visit the Federal Communications website for web resources that they have on blocking calls. It has links to different devices. It has links to different telephone providers for cell phones and traditional landlines and all sorts of different information there. So that's the FCC's website at fcc.gov. And if you don't have, can't get this full live link, which it should be a live link in the PDF PowerPoint attached to your handouts, but you can always search for Stop Unwanted Calls FCC and it'll come up. And y'all, I can feel in the back of my throat, there is a ticking time bomb of allergens that is trying to make me cough. So I'm going to be sipping my drink and trying to make sure that our last 5 minutes of this presentation goes uninterrupted, but bear with me just in case. All right, so we have the tool of the Do Not Call Registry. We have the call blocking devices that we may be able to help us to stop or reduce the number of robocalls that we're getting. But then what about not engaging? This is another tool that you have in your toolbox to make sure that you are not marked live by the robocaller and being subjected to more of them. So if you don't recognize the number, don't answer the call. That's the number one thing. You can just let it go to voicemail. If it's something that's important, you can see if it's somebody that you recognize. And if they do leave a voicemail, because some scammers are leaving voicemails these days, and they're saying that they're from a particular federal or state agency or somebody official, don't call back the number that they leave. I would say try and find a legitimate number through your own resources, your phone book or the internet, and contact that number instead. Hang up, don't speak or press any numbers. If you go onto YouTube, you can find some folks who will engage with the robocallers, and especially if they know they're a scam. And some of them are smart and savvy, and they can mess through technology with whatever's going on in India or whatever country on that robocall. But that is not the recommended course of action. So we say, don't speak, don't press any numbers, hang up. If you press a number, it may just make it to where they know you're live. They know that you're listening to it. If you speak, especially if you respond to a question with a yes or no, they may be recording it to then try and say that you purchased a product or a service later on. So we don't want to, they're trying to identify targets, right? These scammers are trying to identify targets. So we don't want them to know that we're playing along through speaking or pressing any numbers or whatever else, because that could just lead to more calls. And report the call to the Federal Trade Commission. So you can either go through the donotcall.gov website. If you haven't participated in the scam or given any money or anything like that, you can report through the Do Not Call website, but you can also go to report fraud to ftc.gov. And we especially recommend that if you were a victim of a scam. So Crackdown on robocalls. So when you're reporting these kinds of scams, the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, they're taking in phone numbers that you report, they release them to the public each business day so that those numbers can be added to those call blocking devices, right? And the telephone providers, and everybody knows what's going on. And then it also helps law enforcement identify the people behind the illegal calls so they can take action. So here's some examples of what's going on at the federal level with the crackdown on robocalls. So first we have the Federal Communications Commission's rules, and it's the Stir, Shaken Technology Rule. So this particular kind of technology essentially makes it to where you can verify where the call came from and that it matches the caller ID. So you don't have caller ID spoofing going on. So it allows phone companies to spot and stop robocalls. It also makes it to where, if a telephone company sees a phone number come up that has not been assigned yet, or it's been assigned to somebody, like it's a personal cell phone number, but 1 million calls are originating from that number, they can stop those robocalls. It makes it so it doesn't even get to your telephone number. So larger carriers like Verizon and AT&T, they had to implement this technology by June 30th of last year. But then smaller carriers had until 2023, but the Federal Communications Commission issued a rule backing that date up to June of 2022, because we have seen scammers trying to circumvent the law. So as soon as the larger carriers put this stir-shaken technology into play, they just kind of shifted gears and went over to the smaller carriers. They've also done more illegal things like trying to buy legitimate phone number lists of unassigned numbers, but then making them, getting them assigned and then taking them themselves, which is illegal on a couple different levels. And so the federal agencies are looking at it from that level too. So they're trying to figure out how they can plug these holes, right? Because every time they're trying to do something additional, then the scammers just kind of reroute their schemes and find a different outlet for them to be able to reach consumers, which is why it's so important that you know what to do to stop them. And there have been enforcement actions. The Federal Communications Commission has levied over $450 million in fines over the last few years. There's a company in Texas that was health insurance telemarketers doing 1 billion illegally spoofed robocalls. They had a $120 million fine against somebody doing neighbor spoofing. So it looks like a call is coming from within your area, for a timeshare marketing company. A North Carolina-based health insurance marketer paid $82 million in fines, and then an Arizona marketer as well, $37.5 million. And then the Federal Trade Commission, so they issued cease and desist orders for 11 companies in 2021 for illegal robocalls, and that's 2021 alone. And also in 2021, they engaged in a lot of enforcement actions and got money back for consumers, because remember, the Federal Trade Commission focuses on the sales component of robocalls. And so they got $1.8 million back to consumers from LifeWatch due to their robocall issues and violations of the Do Not Call list. $1.1 million for consumers from a money-making opportunity. $100,000 fine to Grand Bahama Cruise because they had millions of illegal robocalls. And one of the ongoing ones is a case against Associated Community Services. And so they were purportedly a charity, and they placed more than 1.3 billion calls and collected $110 million from consumers. And so they're trying to get $110 million back. They're seizing assets, some vacation homes, some ski boats. They're assessing penalties. So they are definitely engaging in some action. So things are happening. The reports that you make about the calls are being put into the database and being used for enforcement matters. So they're trying to get it from the court cases. You know, they're coming at it from the angle of enforcement through court. They're coming at it from the angle of rulemaking to try and give telephone providers the ability to spot and stop these robocalls. And then you have the tools in your toolbox for the call blocking, the Do Not Call Registry, and just the tips for not engaging to try and manage or crack down on the robocalls across the board.